A glass of red wine poured down from above. Terrence Boykin stood still, not moving. Wine flowed down the white shirt collar, soaked through the shoulder, dripped onto the marble floor. "Sorry," Grant Whitmore said, his voice not having any apology at all. "My hands are shaking too much, probably because it has been too long since seeing our school's legend." Laughter erupted around the ballroom. Someone raised a phone to record. The crystal chandelier light reflected on Terrence's face, cold and still like a lake surface before a storm. 20 years ago, that exact same voice called him class loser in front of hundreds of students. 20 years later, it still hasn't changed its tone. Grant pulled a $20 bill from his wallet, folded it in half, stuffed it into Terrence's suit breast pocket, patted lightly twice. "Buy a new shirt, buddy. This one is ruined." Terrence looked down at the bill, then looked at Grant. Not a single facial muscle of his moved. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, even. "But there is one thing you do not know. I am now no longer the me of 20 years ago." If you were curious about what turned a student called a loser by the whole school into the man standing in the middle of this room tonight, stay with me. Click follow the channel to not miss any part of the story, because what is about to happen will make you have to look back at everything you just saw. 20 years ago, that student called class loser by the whole school stepped into the school gates with a plastic suitcase with a cracked corner, taped tightly with black tape. The 1996 Buick turned into the gate of Kensington College at 8 a.m., the exhaust spewing out a thick gray puff every time Odessa Boykin stepped on the gas. She had driven for 4 hours straight from Roxbury, both hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, eyes not leaving the road even though she had gone over that route countless times in her head. Terrence sat in the passenger seat, the plastic suitcase placed between his legs, the cracked corner of the suitcase taped up with 3 layers of black tape. Inside were 4 shirts, 2 photocopied textbooks from a copy shop on Blue Hill Street, and a leather-bound Bible with frayed corners, a gift from his grandmother before she passed away. "Remember to call me every Sunday," Odessa said, not looking at her son, eyes still glued to the road ahead. "Yes, Mother. And don't let anyone make you feel small." "Yes, Mother." She stopped the car in front of Harrington Hall Dormitory, pulled the handbrake, then finally turned to look at her son. Her hands were calloused. Her index finger had a long scar from the time working at the packaging factory before switching to cleaning hotel rooms. She grabbed Terrence's hand through the car door gap, squeezing tightly. "I did not raise you for 18 years for you to step back from anyone," she said. "Heard me clearly?" "Yes, I heard clearly." She let go of his hand, started the engine. The Buick popped loudly twice, then rolled away, gradually disappearing behind the curve. 2 girls sitting on a nearby stone bench giggled. One pointed her finger toward the disappearing car. Terrence did not turn back to look. He carried his suitcase, walked toward the dormitory building. The campus stretched out like a picture cut out from a magazine. The grass was trimmed into straight lines. The cars parked along the parking lot had logos that Terrence had only ever seen on billboards. Students walking by wore jackets embroidered with the school's name, designer jeans that one pair cost half a month's salary of his mother. Terrence's dormitory room was located on the 3rd floor, at the end of the hallway, next to the fire escape stairs. His roommate, a boy named Delroy Fenner from Mattapan, had moved in the day before. Delroy was hanging a family photo on the wall when Terrence walked in. "Hey, man," Delroy said, holding out a fist. "Is Boston all gone, huh? Meeting you here." Terrence smiled, bumped fists back. "Roxbury. Mattapan. Consider us neighbors." They arranged their belongings in a comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging a few sentences about classes, about finding cheap places to eat around the school. Delroy turned on a song from a small speaker, Marvin Gaye's voice echoing through the thin walls. Terrence placed his grandmother's Bible on the study desk, next to the only picture frame he brought, a photo of his mother standing in front of the Baptist church on Warren Street, wearing her best outfit, smiling brightly on Easter Day. For the first dinner, Terrence went down to the cafeteria alone because Delroy had an appointment to meet some old friends. He lined up to get a tray, chose the cheapest portion on the menu, rice and black beans. A dining table near the window was still empty. He sat down, opened his introductory economics book to read while eating. 3 days later, Terrence sat in the main library, the long row of tables near the window facing the courtyard. He was rereading the chapter on supply and demand, underlining each paragraph with a pencil because he didn't have enough money to buy a new book, only able to borrow a photocopied version from a junior student. A group of 4 walked in, their talking and laughing echoing across the normally quiet corner of the room. Leading the way was a tall boy, hair slicked back neatly, a collared polo shirt embroidered with the logo of some golf school, a gold watch sparkling under the fluorescent lights. That was Grant Whitmore. 3 people followed, one named Colton Riaz, one named Preston Vale, and a blonde girl named Ashley Marsh, giggling at every sentence Grant said as if it was the funniest story in the world. Grant stopped next to Terrence's table, glanced down at the ink-smudged photocopied book page. "What is this?" Grant said, his voice drawn out. "Pirated book?" Terrence did not look up. "Borrowed book. Borrowed from where? The corner copy shop?" Colton snorted a laugh. Grant pulled the opposite chair, sat down without asking. "Where are you from?" "Roxbury." Grant repeated the name, slowly, as if tasting something unpleasant. Roxbury. That is the place where last year the police raided an entire drug-dealing block, right? "Nothing to do with me," Terrence said, his voice still calm. Preston Vale leaned over and whispered something into Grant's ear. The whole group burst out laughing. Grant looked at Terrence from head to toe, his eyes stopping at the old, worn-heeled shoes. "What is your name?" "Terrence," Grant nodded, then smiled, the kind of smile of someone who just thought of a joke that they were proud of. "No, I will call you by a different name, a more fitting name." He turned to look at Colton, looked at Preston, then turned back to look at Terrence. "Class loser," Grant said loudly, enough for the surrounding tables to hear. The library room, which originally only had the sound of flipping book pages and the clicking of keyboard typing, suddenly paused for a moment. A girl sitting 2 tables away looked up, then looked down again. A boy wearing headphones slightly smirked. No one spoke up in objection. Terrence folded the photocopied book closed, stood up, put the chair back into its exact old position. He carried his shoulder bag, walked out of the library, back straight, footsteps not rushed. Grant looked after him, sneered at Colton. "See, exactly the type." Terrence stepped outside, the September afternoon sunlight shining down on the brick-paved walkway. He pulled his phone out, dialed the familiar number. "Mom," he said when hearing his mother's voice on the other end of the line, warm and tired after a long shift. "My son, how is today?" Terrence stopped in the middle of the schoolyard, looking at other students passing by, everyone wearing designer clothes, chatting and laughing animatedly, no one paying attention to him. "I am fine," he said. "It is just that," he hesitated, hand gripping the shoulder bag strap tightly, not yet knowing whether to tell everything or keep it to himself. Have you ever stood in the middle of an unfamiliar crowd, carrying on your shoulders a name you never chose, and wondered how much longer until you could escape from it? Outside the dormitory room window, Grant Whitmore's BMW was still parked right in front of the lawn, and Terrence did not yet know how far the name he was just branded with would still follow him in the next 4 years. "Just what, son?" Odessa asked, her voice dropping. The kind of voice dropping only a mother could recognize right from her child's unfinished sentence. Terrence looked down at the toe of his worn-heeled shoes. "It is nothing, mother. I am just tired. Terrence Odell Boykin. Do not hide it from me." He was silent for a moment, then smiled, even though his mother could not see. "There are some kids here who are a bit unapproachable, but I can handle it." "You listen to me," Odessa said. "Whatever name people call you, that is their business. Who you are, I know. God knows. That is enough." "Yes, mother." The call ended with the familiar goodnight wish. Terrence put his phone in his pocket, continued walking back to the dormitory, but the name Grant just branded him with had followed like a shadow, refusing to let go. By the end of the first week, the entire dormitory floor knew that nickname. By the end of the month, the entire campus knew. People did not need to know Terrence's real name to call him by that other name. Some kids said it right to his face when passing by the hallway. Some kids just smiled softly, enough for him to understand what they were thinking. Grant Whitmore was not the loud, blatantly punching and kicking type of bully. Grant's way was more sophisticated, more patient, and because of that, more dangerous. He turned the humiliation of Terrence into a regular pastime, almost a ritual, performed in front of as many people as possible. During the spring semester of sophomore year, Terrence spent 3 consecutive weeks completing an essay for Professor Aldridge's economics class. He typed the paper on a public computer in the library because he did not have his own laptop, printed it out at the student center for 25 cents a page. He left the printout on the study desk in the room, ran down to the cafeteria to grab a quick lunch. When returning, the stack of papers was soaking in a puddle of spilled coffee from a paper cup placed tilted right next to it. The paper pages stuck together, the ink blurring into dark brown streaks. On the cover page, a shoe print was clearly printed, and a sticky note attached next to it, Grant's scribbled handwriting. "Good luck in the next life, class loser." Terrence stood silently, looking at the ruined stack of papers, then quietly cleaned up, reprinted all 48 pages, costing nearly $20, the amount of money he originally intended to save to buy food for the whole week. He ate 1 meal a day throughout that week, not complaining to anyone, including Delroy. 2 weeks later, a sign appeared taped on the door of Terrence's locker in the gym in black capital letters. "Class loser is here." That sign existed for 11 days. The dormitory manager passed by every morning. No one took it down. Some students saw it. Some people turned away. Some people chuckled softly, then continued walking. A freshman girl, whose name Terrence did not clearly remember, stopped in front of the sign one morning, looked at it for about 5 seconds, then continued walking. She never came back to take it down, just as no one else did that. On the 12th day, Terrence peeled the sign off the locker door himself. The adhesive layer left a scar on the metal, which could never be completely erased even though he had scrubbed with his whole scratched hand. That semester, Professor Aldridge randomly divided groups for a major assignment on business strategy. Terrence was grouped together with 3 other students. Within 24 hours, all 3 asked to change groups. Later, Terrence heard from Delroy that Grant had told them if they worked together with Terrence, they would never be invited to participate in any parties, not be allowed into prestigious study groups, not be introduced to the alumni who still regularly visited the school to recruit interns. Professor Aldridge accepted the requests to change groups without asking for a reason. Terrence did the assignment alone, a 60-page report with a complete financial model and market analysis. He received an A. The group that abandoned him received a B-. No one mentioned that matter one more time again. The worst day came in the spring of senior year, the final presentation in Professor Winslow's advanced finance seminar class. Terrence had prepared for 2 straight weeks. His slides were neat, the data rigorous. He stood in front of the class, started presenting about the micro-lending model in communities lacking banking services. 90 seconds after he began, a sound echoed from the back row, a high and exaggerated squeal, unmistakable. Grant was leaning back in his chair, hand covering his mouth, making that sound just loud enough for the whole room to hear. Colton dropped his face onto the table, shoulders shaking from laughing. Preston bit his fist tightly to suppress his laughter. Ashley Marsh raised her phone, recorded the entire scene with a smile that could curdle milk. The whole room froze. 26 students, 1 professor. No one said a word. No one asked Grant to stop. No one budged in their seat. Have you ever sat in a crowded room, witnessing a wrong thing happening right before your eyes, but your whole body just stiffened, not a single person daring to speak up first? Professor Winslow adjusted his glasses frame, looked at Grant, then looked at Terrence, then looked down at his laptop screen. "Continue, Master Boykin," Terrence continued. His voice did not tremble. His hands did not waver. He completed all 14 slides, walked back to his seat in absolute silence, put the document stack down on the table. Outside the window, Grant Whitmore's father's car was still parked in the school parking lot from a visit last weekend, and Terrence did not yet know that Carr would still appear in front of the school gate one more time, exactly on the most important day of both of them. That car appeared for the last time on a May morning, under a clear blue sky without a single cloud, the graduation day of the class of 2006. Kensington College Stadium was packed with seats, black gowns spread out like a giant carpet under the sun. Terrence stood in the line waiting to be called. The gown borrowed from the student center was 1 size larger than his shoulders. The shoes he wore had worn out soles since sophomore year. He had glued them back with shoe glue bought at the grocery store near the dormitory. In the audience seats behind, Odessa Boykin sat among a strange crowd, leaning on a wooden cane resting by her leg, visibly thinner compared to the day she drove the Buick to take her son to school 4 years ago. Occasionally, she reached out to gently rub her two legs as if they were tired, then hurriedly regained a cheerful expression, afraid her son seeing would worry. Terrence Odell Boykin, the name announcer's voice echoed through the speaker. He stepped onto the podium, shook hands with the principal, received the rolled diploma tied with a blue ribbon. He turned down to look toward the stands, searching for his mother's face among hundreds of strangers. She was clapping, slowly but firmly, two calloused hands touching each other, her face brightening up as if completely forgetting the recent tiredness. No one else clapped. In the front row, Grant Whitmore sat between Colton and Preston. All three were bowing their heads, discussing the upcoming summer vacation in Nantucket. No one looked up at the stage when Terrence's name was called. But right after that, another voice interrupted their conversation. An older man, silver hair, tailored suit, walked up from behind the row of seats, placed his hand on Grant's shoulder, squeezed tightly. "What rank did you tell me you stood in the class?" the man asked, his voice loud enough for those sitting nearby to hear. That was Father Whitmore, chairman of a real estate investment fund, the person who had sponsored an entire academic building for the school. Grant stiffened. I think around the middle of the board. I just talked with the dean," the father continued, his voice as cold as steel. "You stood near the bottom among 200 students. I sponsor this school $1.5 million every year, and you pay me back with that." Colton and Preston looked at each other, trying to pretend not to hear. Ashley Marsh turned her phone in another direction. A few people sitting in the back rows slightly glanced, then turned away, but enough for Grant to feel those gazes clinging to the back of his neck. "I thought you would enter the company to work this summer," the father said, letting go of Grant's shoulder like letting go of something no longer of value. "Now I am not sure anymore." He turned his back and walked away, leaving Grant sitting stiffly among the row of seats, two hands gripping tightly onto the plastic seat edges, face flushed red, not daring to look up at anyone. On the stage, Terrence walked down the stairs, the rolled diploma in his hand, his eyes still glued to his mother. She was smiling, a tired but complete smile, as if all the nights she stayed awake mopping the bus station floor had finally been exchanged for this moment. He walked down to the row of seats, bent down to hug his mother, feeling that she was much thinner compared to the last hug he remembered. He pushed that feeling aside, placed the diploma into her hands. Odessa reached out a trembling hand to touch the leather cover of the diploma, then touched her son's cheek, holding it there for a long time, saying nothing. Behind their backs, Grant still sat motionlessly among his group of friends who were trying to change the subject, his collar suddenly seeming to tighten around his neck under the sweltering May sun. 4 months later, nearly 1,000 miles away, Terrence stepped off at the Greyhound bus station on Harrison Street in Chicago with a canvas shoulder bag, his college diploma rolled up in a plastic tube, and $190 in his pants pocket. The bus station strongly smelled of diesel oil and floor cleaner. An older man was asleep on a bench near the vending machine. His old military jacket with worn shoulders made Terrence suddenly remember his uncle, who had served in the military before returning to Roxbury to work as a night shift security guard. He bought 2 cups of coffee, placed 1 cup next to the sleeping man, then continued walking. His first apartment was a studio room above a laundromat in the South Shore area, costing $400 a month, with no air conditioning. The ceiling leaked every time it rained, and that June it rained almost every day. Terrence placed a pot to catch water under the leak, slept on a mattress picked up 3 blocks away, flipped it upside down, sprayed disinfectant all over the surface. It smelled of chemicals for the first 2 weeks. After that, there was only his own smell. He got a job at a pharmaceutical distribution warehouse in the Cicero area, night shift, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., stacking pallets of medicine and medical supplies onto refrigerated trucks. The cold in the warehouse was the kind of cold that eats deep into the joints and stays there. His fingers cracked and bled right in the second week. He wrapped electrical tape around his fingers, continued stacking goods. During the day, he walked to the Harold Washington Public Library on State Avenue. He sat at a desktop computer between a retired teacher practicing typing emails and a teenager playing browser games. He opened free programming courses, starting from HTML, then CSS, then JavaScript, then Python. The initial syntax lines looked like an alien language. Curly braces and semicolons had no meaning to him. But he still went there every day, exactly 8 hours at the library, 8 hours at the warehouse, the remaining 8 hours divided for sleeping, eating, and calls back home every Sunday evening. "Are you okay, son?" Odessa asked over the phone. Her voice every week seemed a bit thinner, even though she always tried to hide that with a light laugh at the end of the sentence. "I am fine, Mother. I am learning a new thing." "Learning what?" "Computer programming. I think it will lead me somewhere." "I believe in you," she said, and in that voice there was not a bit of doubt, even though she could not understand a single word of what her son had just said. In the second year, Terrence could build a basic website himself. In the third year, he knew how to design a database. In the fourth year, he wrote his own algorithms in a notebook carried on the bus to work, scribbling between red light stops and the sound of the bus air conditioner squealing overhead. Delroy, his dormitory roommate from that year, sometimes called to check in. He had returned to Boston to work as a store manager for a supermarket chain, having a stable life, a 2-bedroom apartment, a non-rusting car. "How long do you plan to do this, Terrence?" Delroy asked in a late-night call, his voice having a part of genuine worry. "Stacking frozen goods at night, sitting in the library during the day, you are exhausting yourself." "I know what I am doing," Terrence replied, his eyes still glued to the computer screen placed on the wooden desk bought from a thrift store. "Do you have a specific plan, or are you just blindly hoping?" Terrence was silent for a moment, his fingers lightly tapping on the keyboard. "I am building something. I do not know exactly what it is yet, but I can feel it taking shape. Have you ever worked exhaustingly day after day for something that does not yet have a shape, just because of a vague feeling that it is worth it?" The idea came on a Tuesday night, at 3 in the morning. Terrence was stacking vaccine boxes onto a refrigerated truck when the warehouse foreman yelled at a driver for delivering to the wrong loading dock. The driver yelled back. The two stood there arguing while the shipment laid outside for 40 minutes, the temperature inside the truck box gradually rising above the safe threshold. Terrence stood silently watching that scene, his breath forming a white smoke trail in the cold air of the warehouse. The vaccine shipment worth $11,000, enough to vaccinate an entire small community, was at risk of being canceled just because 2 men did not know how to coordinate a delivery. He went home that morning, sat down at the table, wrote 3 words on a piece of napkin. Track the trust. The problem did not lie in the truck, did not lie in the driver, did not lie in the warehouse. The problem lay in the fact that there was no system connecting all those links together in real time. Small and medium-scale pharmaceutical companies were still using Excel spreadsheets and phone calls to track the transportation of medicines and vaccines. Terrence had witnessed that from the inside. Every night, time after time again, millions of dollars worth of medicines were destroyed just because one hand did not know what the other hand was doing. He spent the next 6 months building a prototype, a platform for tracking the pharmaceutical supply chain in real time, capable of predicting bottlenecks before they happened. He wrote code on the library computer, tested on paper, fine-tuned in the notebook on the bus. Every Sunday evening, his mother's voice over the phone increasingly had longer pauses, heavy breathing sounds that she tried to hide by turning the phone away. "Are you still okay, Mother?" he asked one evening after hearing a longer sigh than usual. "Just tired, son. Do not worry about me. Worry about your project." Terrence did not know she had started hiding her swollen leg episodes from many months ago, hiding even the fact that she had missed 2 medical appointments because of not having enough money to pay the copay fee, hiding even the nights she sat alone in the kitchen, hands trembling from exhaustion, just to not bother her son's dream. He started knocking on the doors of investors on an October morning, wearing the only suit he had, bought from a thrift store for $35, the sleeves a bit short compared to his wrists. The first investor declined before he finished, saying the second sentence in the presentation. The second investor did not show up at the appointment, leaving Terrence sitting alone in the waiting room for 45 minutes before the receptionist announced he had flown to New York since early morning. The third investor burst out, laughing right in the middle of the presentation. The fourth investor said the pharmaceutical logistics market was too crowded, with no room left for a new player. The fifth investor bluntly said that Terrence did not have a suitable background. The sixth investor said he did not have the right necessary connections. The seventh investor said, in the most polite way possible, that he did not have the right look that other investors in the next fundraising round wanted to see. Terrence clearly understood what that sentence meant. The eighth to the 12th investor found different ways to say the same thing. Too risky. Too early. Not enough evidence. The 12th person, a man wearing a navy blue suit with a ring engraved with the Wharton School crest, leaned across the table, his voice seeming like he was giving him a sincere piece of advice. Boy, go find a decent job. This is not for people like you. Terrence stood up, shook his hand, walked out of the office, sat into the 2003 Corolla with more than 190,000 miles on the odometer, leaned his forehead against the steering wheel, not saying a word. Odessa Boykin passed away 8 months before that. End-stage renal failure, a complication from the diabetes she had hidden for many years, not having enough money to do dialysis regularly, not having enough time to rest between 3 jobs. She had spent 3 decades choosing between taking care of her health and paying her son's tuition, and finally her body had paid the price for that choice. Terrence drove back to Roxbury to attend the funeral. 12 people came to visit. The pastor misread her last name twice in the eulogy. Terrence paid for the coffin with the entire amount of money saved from the night shifts at the warehouse. Not enough to buy a tombstone, so he built a cross out of pallet wood himself, carving her name on it with a paring knife. He sat in the cemetery's parking lot for 20 minutes, then started the engine, drove to the next appointment. Have you ever had to continue working, continue smiling at strangers, right on the day that your heart is breaking? The 13th investor was Dolores Ann Coleman, 61 years old, white-haired, wearing a pair of reading glasses on a beaded chain. She ran a small venture capital fund located in a renovated old firehouse in the Bronzeville area, specializing in pouring capital into founders overlooked by other funds. Terrence walked in with a refurbished laptop bought for the price of $120, presented the presentation for the 13th time, the exact same slides, the exact same data, but his voice now was calmer, slower, as if accustomed to being rejected to the point it no longer made his hands tremble. Dolores listened without interrupting a single sentence. When he finished presenting, she took off her glasses, placed them on the table. "How long have you been building this?" 6 months for the prototype, 4 years to learn how to write code. Learned where? Public library? She looked at him for a long time, not looking at the frayed-sleeved suit, not looking at the unsoled shoes glued back together with glue. She looked straight into his eyes. $50,000, she said. "I want 15% of the shares and a seat on the board of directors." Terrence's 2 hands trembled under the table. He pressed them tightly down on his knees to keep calm. "Agreed," he said. Vireo Systems was born in an abandoned warehouse rented out on Damon Street for the price of $400 a month. The first 3 employees were all people he knew at the library: a retired database administrator, a college dropout girl self-teaching interface design, and an immigrant from Nigeria who could write back-end code faster than anyone Terrence had ever seen. They worked 18 hours every day, eating instant noodles and sandwiches bought at the gas station, sleeping on an air mattress placed between server racks. The warehouse had no heating system in winter, no ventilation in summer. Terrence lost 15 kilograms in the first 6 months. The night he witnessed the dashboard on the screen light up completely green for the first time. Every truck's position pinpointed accurately, every route optimized, every delivery time frame hitting the exact schedule. He sat alone in the warehouse at 2 in the morning, looking at the screen, thinking about the $11,000 vaccine shipment once left outside that year. He thought about the screaming foreman, about the driver screaming back, about the 40-minute time span that no one in that system had ever thought of a way to prevent. He closed the laptop, preparing to lie down on the air mattress, when the phone in his pocket vibrated. A call from a number he had never saved a name for. That call was from a freelance journalist writing an article about potential logistics startups in Chicago, but Terrence declined the interview, put the phone down, and returned to work. In the second year, Vireo Systems signed its first contract with an independent pharmacy chain consisting of 28 stores spread across the Midwest, specializing in distributing diabetes, medications, and types of medicine requiring strict cold storage. Within 90 days, Terrence's platform cut down 40% of the amount of spoiled medicine due to wrong transportation procedures. The CEO of the pharmacy chain called Dolores Ann Coleman directly to say that this was the best investment she had ever introduced in her 30-year career. The rumor spread silently at first, among supply chain directors meeting at pharmaceutical industry conferences, then spread faster. By the age of 30, Vireo Systems had 180 employees and contracts in 9 states. By the age of 32, the company expanded into the more complex cold-chain pharmaceutical sector, vaccines, insulin, biological products. The type of goods that a late delivery does not only mean a loss, but means a human life. By the age of 35, Vireo Systems listed publicly. The IPO valued the company at $3,800,000,000. Terrence Boykin, the boy who used to sit eating rice and beans alone in the Kensington College dormitory cafeteria, now had a net worth far exceeding the total assets of all the people who ever called him class loser combined. But he did not answer interviews, did not post anything on social networks, did not appear at galas or charity auctions where cameras waited ready at the door. No Forbes magazine cover, no TED Talk, not a single public photo after the year he was 30. He became a name on a balance sheet, not a face. Have you ever achieved the thing you had desired for a whole lifetime, then realized you no longer wanted anyone to see you achieve it? And he began to silently buy up many things. A commercial real estate portfolio stretching across the Northeast, a technology incubation center in the South Loop of Chicago, minority shares in a small basketball team facing financial difficulties, and a deal no one could understand the reason for, the Ridgeway Grand Hotel in Kensington, the small town where the university he used to attend was located, the town almost no one on the map could point out the exact location of. He bought it through a shell company named Odessa Holdings. No press release, no announcement at all. The hotel staff did not know who the real owner was. The town did not know. And Grant Whitmore, who at that time had collapsed his father's real estate company within just 3 years and was holding a mid-level regional manager position at a pharmaceutical distribution company named Holbrook Distribution, completely did not know Holbrook Distribution was a subsidiary of Vireo Systems. Grant Whitmore had worked for Terrence Boykin for nearly 2 years without ever knowing that. The evening he read the quarterly personnel report from the organizational department of Holbrook, one of hundreds of similar reports he received every month from subsidiaries, Terrence recognized that name right on the first line. Grant Whitmore, regional manager. Salary of $72,000 a year plus a company car. He sat in the corner office on the 32nd floor of Vireo Systems headquarters, the Chicago city lights sparkling below the window, reading that name over and over again as if it could disappear by itself if he looked long enough. He could fire Grant immediately, no reason needed. No explanation needed. He could order the Holbrook Human Resources Department to create a disciplinary record so that Grant would lose his job in disgrace without ever knowing who was behind that decision. He could call his private lawyer, find out if there was any legal way to make the mortgage loan on Grant's house tightened with interest rates, or make Grant's leased BMW recalled early. The power he had now was big enough to do those things without anyone ever tracing a trail leading back to him. He thought of the sign taped on the locker, the glue mark that could never be completely erased. He thought of the squeal faking a monkey sound echoing in the middle of the presentation, 26 students silent, a professor bowing his head looking at the laptop screen. He thought of the 48 paper pages soaking in the coffee puddle, to the scribbled note, "Good luck in the next life, class loser." His fingers rested on the keyboard. The mouse cursor stopped right over the email drafting box sent to the Holbrook Human Resources Manager. He could type 3 short sentences and everything Grant ever had would collapse within 48 hours. He sat like that for 20 minutes straight, not moving, only having the murmuring air conditioner sound and the city lights blinking in the distance. Then he thought of his mother. Not the image of her lying on the hospital bed in the final days, but the image of her standing in the kitchen of the small apartment in Roxbury, apron stained with flour, teaching him how to cook Sunday-baked beans, her voice echoing clearly in memory. You take revenge by living better than them, Terrence. Not by lowering yourself down to their level. He closed the email without sending. But he did not delete that record from his mind. He kept it, placed it to one side, like a folding knife kept in a shirt pocket, not yet used, but always knowing its exact location. 3 weeks later, an envelope was sent to the Odessa Holdings office at Vireo Systems headquarters, forwarded from Terrence's old home address in Boston, where his mother used to live, now managed by a distant aunt who knew how to forward mail to him. Inside was a card printed in gold on a navy blue background. 20th anniversary of the class of 2006, Kensington College. Underneath, a handwritten piece of paper was additionally clipped in. The handwriting Terrence recognized immediately, even though he had not seen it for 20 years. Grant Whitmore's handwriting. Heard you are still somewhere out there, class loser. Come see how successful we have been. You probably still keep your original form. Terrence read the piece of paper twice, then put it down on the work desk, next to the only picture frame he still kept. The photo of his mother standing in front of the Baptist church on Warren Street, wearing her best outfit, smiling brightly on Easter Day. He called Yvette Marchand, general manager of the Ridgeway Grand Hotel, the only person in Kensington who knew clearly who really stood behind Odessa Holdings. "Mrs. Marchand," he said when hearing her voice on the line. "There is an event about to take place at our hotel, right?" "Yes, Master Boykin. The 20th anniversary of Kensington College, booking the grand ballroom for the end of this month. I want to be confirmed on the guest list," he said. "And I want to be present there." There was a short silence on the other end of the line. "Do you want me to prepare anything special, sir?" Terrence looked out the window. The Chicago city lights stretching out below like a map of light. Each lamp was a story he did not know, just like how no one in that ballroom building knew his own story. "Not needed yet," he said. "Just let everything happen normally. I just want to be present there at the right time." He paused for a second. "Whenever I touch my tie, you step into the room." He hung up the phone, picked up Grant's handwritten piece of paper one more time, reread the last line. "You probably still keep your original form." He folded the piece of paper in half, put it away into the desk drawer, right next to a personnel record stack he had printed out from 3 weeks ago but had never reopened since that night. Grant stood stunned, his hand still reaching out halfway after the recent shoulder pat, his mouth half open, intending to drop another joking sentence. But Terrence's sentence was still hanging in the air, not yet finished, and there was something in Terrence's eyes that made Grant stop short. "What?" Grant asked, trying to squeeze out a laugh, but it broke into a forced sound, unable to convince anyone, including himself. Terrence raised his hand, lightly touched his tie, adjusted the knot like an unconscious habit. The double doors at the end of the ballroom opened right after that. Yvette Marchand stepped in, not rushed, her shoe heels tapping evenly on the marble floor, rhythmic enough to cut across the jazz music playing halfway in the corner of the room. The band stopped playing mid-sentence. 2 waiters carrying wine trays stopped short at the kitchen door. Yvette stopped a few steps away from the small stage, where Grant had just set up to project the slideshow. She looked around the room once, then directed her gaze toward Grant. "Mr. Whitmore!" she said, her voice echoing enough for the nearby tables to hear clearly. "Sorry for interrupting. I need to announce an important thing related to this evening." Grant frowned, trying to regain a proactive look. "We are in the middle of the program. Is there something that cannot wait until later?" "Afraid it cannot wait," Yvette said. Grant glanced around, searching for support from the crowd, but the atmosphere in the room had changed, a wary silence spreading like an oil spill. "All right," he said, trying to keep a joking voice. "Speak quickly." Yvette stepped onto the small podium, stood next to the microphone but did not grab it. She did not need to. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "I know Mr. Whitmore is the person who stepped up to book this ballroom for the class reunion tonight, and I ask for permission to clarify one thing related to the ownership of the Ridgeway Grand Hotel, because I believe this is directly related to what is happening in this room." Grant crossed his arms. "I booked this room. I paid in full. Is there any problem with my room booking?" "There is no problem with your room rental contract at all," Yvette said, turning to look straight at him. "You rented this space legally, following the right process. But you do not own this building, Mr. Whitmore. And the person who owns it has been present in this room throughout the entire evening." A wave of whispering ran across the tables. A few people turned their heads to look around, trying to guess who among the 200 guests could be the mysterious owner of the building. Yvette turned to the corner of the room where Terrence stood, his shirt still stained with wine spots, not yet having time to dry. "Mr. Boykin," she said, "do you want to say a few words?" The silence at this moment was so thick that Terrence clearly heard the sound of cold ice melting in a wine glass someone forgot on the nearest table. 200 pairs of eyes poured toward him. He stepped forward, his footsteps not rushed, rebuttoned his suit jacket, stopped a few steps away from Grant. "I am Terrence Boykin," he said, his voice not loud but echoing enough in the room that was holding its breath. "Most of you here know me by a different name." He paused, his eyes gliding over Grant. "A moment ago I said to you, I am no longer the me of 20 years ago. This is the thing I want you to understand clearly." No one said anything. Ashley Marsh stood dead silent, phone still held in hand but her thumb no longer moving on the screen. "This building," Terrence continued, "every brick, every curtain, every wine bottle behind that bar counter belongs to me. I bought it back 3 years ago through a company named Odessa Holdings, named after my mother." He paused for a second. "I still keep the cracked corner plastic suitcase my mother taped back with black tape that year, placed in my office, right next to the window. It reminds me to remember where I started from." The whispering erupted into an unstoppable stream of sound. Phones were pulled out across the room, fingers typing incessantly. Ashley Marsh typed his name into the search box, the screen showing a series of articles, Forbes, Bloomberg, a net worth number with the letter B standing in front. Her face turned pale white. "Mr. Whitmore," Terrence said, turning to Grant, "your room rental contract is still completely valid. I did not come here to cancel your party." Grant stood motionlessly, both hands hanging loosely, his voice when raised sounding thin and trembling. Then what did you come here to do?" "To tell you one thing," Terrence said, "that you have never known throughout the past 2 years." He pulled his phone from the inside suit jacket pocket, swiped to a contact list, pressed call, turned on the speakerphone. 3 rings echoed clearly in the completely silent room. "Master Boykin, good evening, sir." A woman's voice echoed through the speaker, as clear as a church bell. "Helen," Terrence said, eyes not leaving Grant's face. "Please confirm an information for me. Is Hallbrook Distribution a subsidiary directly under Vireo Systems?" "That is correct, sir. Hallbrook was acquired by Vireo from 2 years ago. And can you help me confirm the job position of an employee working there?" Name Grant Whitmore. A short silence, the sound of keyboard typing echoing through the speaker. "Yes, sir. Regional manager, salary of $72,000 a year, plus a company car." Grant staggered, one hand gripping the nearby table edge, his face as pale white as a sheet of paper. "That," he stammered, "that is impossible." "It is the truth," Terrence said, his voice still calmly chilling. "You have worked for me for nearly 2 years now, Grant. Every paycheck you receive, every meeting you sit to attend, all come from my company." Grant's knees buckled a bit, not exactly falling, just a light slump like a building beginning to sink before collapsing entirely. He dug tightly into the table edge, his knuckles turning pale white. "Helen," Terrence continued, eyes still not leaving Grant, "I need you to handle a matter." "Yes, sir," Helen replied through the speaker, her voice calm as if this was just a normal work call in the middle of a Tuesday morning. "What matter do you need me to handle?" Terrence looked straight into Grant's eyes, who was standing rooted to the spot in the middle of the small stage, his hand still gripping the table edge as if letting go would make him collapse. "Transfer the entire performance review file of Grant Whitmore over the past 2 years to the Regional Human Resources Department," Terrence said, "and arrange for him a direct working session with the Employee Development Department next Monday." Grant blinked, unable to understand what he had just heard. "What? What?" "Not firing," Terrence said, still keeping an even voice, but this time something was different, no longer as cold as steel. "Re-evaluate. Exactly the position you deserve, based on true ability, not based on the family name you once had." The whispering around the room settled down into a confused silence. No one among the 200 guests understood the reason behind that decision, including Grant. "You thought I would destroy you," Terrence said, small enough for only Grant and those standing closest to hear. "I once thought of that. 3 weeks ago, I sat in my office, my fingers placed on the keyboard, ready to type 3 sentences to take away everything you had." Grant swallowed hard, unable to say anything. "But my mother taught me one thing," Terrence continued. "She said you take revenge by living better than them, not by lowering yourself down to their level. What do you think you would do if one day you hold in your hands enough power to destroy the person who once humiliated you, but have to choose between revenge and the thing your mother once taught? He turned back toward the microphone on the podium, this time grabbing it. I want to say one more thing, not only to Grant, but to everyone who once sat silently watching a person being humiliated, he said, his eyes gliding over every face in the room, stopping a bit at Colton, at Preston, at Ashley. Vario Systems has just established a scholarship fund named after my mother for freshmen at Kensington College who are in difficult circumstances. Every year, the fund will fully sponsor 10 students, not only tuition, but also accommodation, books, and a living allowance so they do not have to choose between eating one meal or eating 3 meals every day. A solitary clap echoed from the corner of the room. Then another. Then the whole room gradually merged together into a round of applause, not exactly because they fully understood what had just happened, but because they felt they had just witnessed something much bigger than this class reunion. Sarah Higgins, a classmate who once sat behind Terrence in 3 classes but had never talked to him once, stood up from the table, walked closer to Grant, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Grant," she said, her voice trembling. "I am sorry. I stood and watched for 4 straight years and did not say a single word to defend Terrence." "I am sorry for that," Grant did not reply, his eyes still glued to Terrence, as if trying to find an explanation for a thing exceeding his ability to understand. Terrence placed the microphone down on the podium, looked around the room for the last time, the crystal chandelier light reflecting on his calm face. "I did not come here tonight to take revenge," he said, his voice smaller but still echoing enough. "I came to remind everyone in this room that 20 years ago, there was a student sitting eating rice and beans alone in the cafeteria, and not a single one among you ever stopped to ask if he was okay." He stepped down from the podium, walked past Grant, stopped for a second, enough to look straight into the eyes of the person who once called him class loser for 4 straight years. "This Monday," Terrence said, "come on time." 6 months after that night, a clear April morning covered the Kensington College campus with a layer of pale yellow sunlight. Terrence Boykin stood in front of the main library building, where he once sat reading the ink-smudged photocopied book that year. He wore a simple gray suit, nothing ostentatious, the old leather briefcase slung over his shoulder, the type of briefcase he had used since the days still at the Cicero warehouse. In his breast pocket, he placed a small photo with frayed corners, his mother standing in front of the Baptist church on Warren Street, wearing her best outfit, smiling brightly on Easter Day. The photo had followed him from Harrington Hall Dormitory, through the leaky studio room in South Shore, through the abandoned warehouse on Damon Street, all the way to the corner office on the 32nd floor now. In front of the library door, a new bronze plaque was mounted, shining under the sun. Odessa Boykin Library, commemorating the woman who believed that education is the road that never closes. Inside the main hall, placed in a small glass cabinet right at the entrance, was the cracked corner plastic suitcase taped with black tape from that year, accompanied by a small card with the text, the only item the founder brought on enrollment day. A small crowd gathered around the entrance, mostly freshmen, very young faces, a few wearing old frayed jackets, worn heeled shoes, exactly the way Terrence once stepped through this gate 20 years ago. Yvette Marchand stood next to him, holding a thin file folder in her hand. "The first 10 scholarships have been awarded, Mr. Boykin. All 10 students have settled into their accommodation in the dormitory, books fully supplied." "Thank you, Yvette," Terrence said, his eyes still tracking the young students who were chatting and laughing, not yet knowing of his existence, only knowing the name on the bronze plaque. A young girl, hair neatly braided, backpack slung over her shoulder, separated from her group of friends, approached Terrence with a timid look. "Excuse me, are you the founder of the scholarship fund?" she asked. "That is correct." "My name is Destiny," she said, her voice trembling slightly from nervousness. "I am one of the first scholarship recipients. I just want to say thank you to you. My mother works 3 jobs to raise me, and I used to think I would never have enough money to study in a place like this." Terrence looked at the girl. Something in her eyes made his chest tighten. Not hurting, but a familiar feeling he had never been able to name, almost like seeing his own self 20 years ago, standing in front of the school gate with the cracked corner suitcase. "Your mother must be very proud of you," he said. "She always tells me not to let anyone make me feel small," Destiny said, smiling. Do you realize, sometimes the greatest gift we leave for the world is not what we achieve, but how we choose to use it for whom? Terrence nodded slightly, said nothing more, just reached out to lightly squeeze her shoulder once, then watched her return to her group of friends, stepping into the library bearing his mother's name. That afternoon, he drove alone to Mount Hope Cemetery in Roxbury, where his mother rested in peace. The pallet wood cross from that year had now been replaced by a marble tombstone, engraved with a simple inscription: Odessa Ruth Boykin. The mother who never stopped believing. He sat down next to the grave, placed the small photo in his shirt pocket onto the stone slab, next to a bouquet of white gladiolus he had just bought at the flower shop near the cemetery gate. "I did it, Mother," he said softly, his voice only enough for himself to hear. "I did not lower myself down to their level. I think you would be proud." The afternoon wind blew gently through the row of maple trees around the cemetery, making the young leaves rustle softly. Terrence sat there for a long time, not rushed, having no meeting, waiting, having no schedule urging him to stand up. The phone in his pocket vibrated slightly. A message from Helen, Hallbrook Distribution, Human Resources Department. "Mr. Boykin, the quarterly review report for Mr. Grant Whitmore has just been completed. He has excellently completed the retraining program, and the team proposes promoting him to the regional director position. Do you want to review it before we announce?" Terrence looked at the phone screen for a long time, his fingers gliding lightly on the glass surface, not rushing to reply yet. He looked up at the tombstone, then looked down at the message line one more time, then put the phone away into his pocket without typing a single word yet. Terrence pulled his phone out again, typed a short line to send back to Helen. "Approved. Announce it today." He sat for a while longer by the marble slab, watching the afternoon sunlight gradually turn pale orange on the row of maple trees, then stood up, lightly brushed his coat tail, stepped out to the car. There are people who spend their whole lives to prove to others that they are worthy. I once thought Terrence would be one of those, that night at the Ridgeway Grand Hotel ballroom would be the moment he finally won. But the deeper I go into his story, the more I realize true victory does not lie in the night Grant fell to his knees in front of 200 people. It lies in the way Terrence chose not to press the button to send the email destroying a human being, even though he had the full right to do so. Dignity is not something others give to us. It is the thing we can keep for ourselves, even when no one is watching. What about you? Have you ever stood in Terrence's position, being intentionally made to feel small by someone in front of others? And what way did you choose to move forward? Or have you ever been the person standing in the crowd, silently watching someone being humiliated, and looking back now, you wish you had spoken up? I really want to hear your story. No matter how small it is, write it down below. Thank you for staying to hear the whole story of Terrence with me tonight. See you again in the next story.